Good morning and welcome to the Cabinet meeting. As usual, this has been broadcast live via the County Council's website and it will be archived so you can view it afterwards. Would everyone please remember to switch their microphones on before they speak and turn it off when they finish speaking. Apologies for absence. I've received no apologies. Minutes, pages 3 to 14. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of December 2024 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 2, urgent items. There were no urgent items. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest in respect of any items on the agenda? I will declare another registrable interest in agenda item 8 regarding the Charnwood local plan as a member of the Borough Council. And just to, go back to apologies, we have received apologies from Nick Rushton.
Just ask on the medium-term financial strategy, we all have to declare because obviously we're all council taxpayers, or is that just taken as given?
That's taken as given. We've had some guidance sent around from the monitoring officer about anything that you might need to, but no, we don't need to declare for that. Okay, item 4, the provisional medium-term financial strategy 2025-26 to 2028-29, pages 15 to 262. So our first report today sets out the medium-term financial strategy for 2025-26 to 2028-29 for approval, following consideration of the draft MTFS by the Cabinet in December and the overview and scrutiny bodies in January, and receipt of the provisional local government finance settlement. Appendix Q to this report, setting out the comments of the overview and scrutiny bodies, have been circulated separately and is attached on the order of paper marked 4A. Due to changes arriving from the final local government financial settlement and receipt of final business rates information from Leicestershire district councils, slight amendments have had to be made to appendices A, B, C and E to the report. These were circulated yesterday and also attached to the order paper marked 4B. Subject to the Cabinet's support, the medium-term financial strategy will be referred to the Budget Council meeting on the 19th of February for final approval. Declan Keegan, Director of Corporate Resources, will present the report and then we'll ask Lee to speak as lead member.
Thank you. In the final quarter of 2024, there were 3 government announcements that will have a significant impact upon the County Council. These have been incorporated into the MTFS to varying degrees, so it felt important to explain the treatment before going into the report. Firstly, there was a Chancellor's budget where the difficult position that the national finances are in was set out, as was the Chancellor's intention to limit increases in public service expenditure that will result in real-term cuts for some departments. Whilst we do not know where the cuts will fall, there is no indication that local government will be spared. As such, some provision has been made in the MTFS to reflect this. The second announcement was the recommencement of local government funding reform. Leicestershire has long campaigned for this, and as a low-funded authority, most reasonable people would expect us to gain. However, the government arbitrarily increased the weighting of deprivation when allocating the latest round of funding. Whilst deprivation is an important indicator of need, it is not the only one, and an evidence-based approach should be adopted, otherwise reforms will not be equitable. As such, caution must be taken with these reforms, and no impact has been assumed in the MTFS. The final announcement is the government's intention to end the 2-tier system of local government. This would be a significant change for the councils in Leicestershire. At this stage, we do not know what form the reorganisation will take or when it will be implemented. As a result, the MTFS does not include the costs or benefits of reorganisation. Although I can assure Cabinet that if the 2019 business case was implemented, we would be able to fund the implementation on a spend-to-save basis due to the short payback period. So turning to the report. Since the draft MTFS was produced, there has been a slight improvement in the overall position. Although this does not change the key messages, we're still forecasting to use reserves to balance the budget next year, and the gap between income and expenditure is still forecast to exceed £90 million by the final year of the MTFS. The main changes to the 25-26 budget since the draft was released are a £1 million improvement in government grants, although unfortunately the shortfall in national insurance compensation was confirmed, and a £1 million additional investment in flooding improvements works, reflecting the impact on the county earlier this year. Since this report was drafted, there are some further updates following receipt of the final local government settlement and the expected business rate income from districts. This has led to a £2 million reduction in resources available to the County Council, despite government grant increasing by approximately £800,000. The reduction in business rates is due to Harbour and North West Leicestershire having deficits on their collection funds. That is a result of income falling short of their previous estimates. This can happen for a range of reasons, for example, overestimating the level of empty properties. We have offset the balance of this shortfall by removing the remaining growth contingency, and as the amendment only relates to 25-26, it's neutral for future years and the use of reserves. This is the reason for the amendment required to the report. The draft MTFS assumed a council tax increase of 4.99%, generating £20 million. Nothing has changed to suggest that this increase is not required, and still only covers the increase in national living wage and national insurance. On the government's preferred measure of core spending power, over 70% of the additional income for 25-26 is derived through council tax, rather than central government resources. Without the council tax increase, we would be in an impossible position. Over the course of the MTFS, £85 million of saving have been identified to help mitigate the additional costs from service demand and inflation. Despite this, no year of the MTFS can be balanced without the use of reserves, and the gap between income and expenditure is forecast to be £91 million by the final year of the MTFS. The government is committed to undertake a spending review later this year. This should confirm the level of financial problem that we have to solve locally and what is the balance required between savings and council tax. The budget for next year is built on reasonable assumptions. Whilst the forecast use of reserve is not desirable, my assessment is that we can be confident of delivering a balanced position. For the following years of the MTFS, there is a greater uncertainty, and with numerous competing demands on the public purse, we will have to hope that the increase in economic growth being targeted by the government materialises. The combination of a pending spending review, funding reform and reorganisation make the level of uncertainty being faced undoubtedly the highest we have faced. When opportunities such as reorganisation present themselves, it is vital that the financial implications are understood and the savings optimised so that the best value is secured for residents. As always, this is a very challenging MTFS, with some difficult savings and some major risks to delivery. The demands for social care and SEND will not go away. Additional savings will need to be found to mitigate the pressures and ensure that essential services can continue to be delivered. We remain better placed than most authorities due to the benefits of a strong balance sheet and a good track record of delivering on the challenges we face. The recommendations included in the amendments reflect the reduction in resources as set out in the order paper.
Thank you. Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Our 4-year plan lays out the tough situation facing this council, and indeed all upper tier authorities and councils up and down the country. Rapidly rising demand for services and inflation is driving up our costs by £218 million over the next 4 years. This compares to expected extra income and savings of just £127 million, hence the £91 million gap at the end of the 4-year MTFS that Declan's mentioned and we are asking you to approve today. It is not all doom and gloom, however. We have earmarked around £100 million to support vulnerable children and adults, and a further £12 million to fix potholes on our roads. And following the devastating floods in January, it is now proposed to invest £1 million more in helping communities clean up and become flood ready, and James will talk more about this when he seconds the motion. We plan to use reserves to manage a small budget gap next year of £4 million, but by 2027, the following year, this gap is forecast to increase to £38 million and rise to £91 million by 2029. As Deborah has said publicly, our focus has to be managing what's in our gift whilst remaining financially resilient. We are investing big sums of money in supporting vulnerable people, directing as much as we can into services we know our residents value, such as mending potholes and supporting our flood-hit communities. The Council's yearly budget totals £615 million for 25-26. Our authority is one of the biggest organisations in the county, and we're spending on average £10 million each and every week on delivering crucial services for our Leicestershire residents. The pressure on our budget is relentless. The national living wage and the national insurance changes alone added £20 million to our costs for next year. This includes what we need to pay our care providers, which is not funded by government. As a county council, we are lean, we are high performing, but we are low funded. We continue to do the best we can with the money we have. We do not want to increase council tax again this year, but without it, we'd have to make a further £20 million worth of savings next year. Our residents understand our funding situation, and in our recent budget consultation feedback showed good support for our proposals to ensure that we continue to deliver for the residents of Leicestershire. As a county council, we have taken the tough decisions and planned ahead. We are not at crisis point that many of the councils are currently facing. This is down to prudent decisions taken by this leadership and managed by and controlled by your officers. We are now at a stage where it's vital that this government tackles the big issues that are driving our costs head on. Extra money is needed to provide services across the county. We do see local government reform as the way to save money locally by removing duplication from the two-tier system and putting this money back into service delivery. Cabinet members, the books do balance for next year by using reserves to manage the small gap. There is £1 million extra to support flood-hit communities. We're investing just under 100 million to support our vulnerable adults and communities. There's an extra £12 million to fix the potholes and repair roads. We are proposing a council tax rise of 4.99% from April. We've got £33 million worth of savings built into this by redesigning services, reducing the cost of our back office support services, and by using smarter procurement. And we also are proposing a £380 million 4-year capital pot to fund the cost of building our roads that are needed, social care accommodation, and new school places to support our new housing. I would like to thank Scrutiny Commission and its committees for the work that they have done in scrutinising the budget in whole and by departments. Their reports are included in this pack. This MTFS does not appear here on its own today, and I would like to thank Declan, Simone and the team for the work that goes into this process we see all year round. And I'd also like to thank all departments for their tireless approach to meeting the needs that we have as an authority in delivering this balanced budget, but while still delivering our key services to residents. I'm therefore happy to propose all the motions A through to S on the order paper with the following amendments: that the net revenue budget for 25-26 at 2A be amended from 617.2 million to 615.2, and that the revised appendices A, B, C and E be approved under recommendation 2B. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. James?
Thank you. I second the motions. Every year since I've been a councillor, budgets have been getting tighter and decisions more difficult. This year is no exception, and Lee has outlined some of the measures we've had to take to set a balanced budget, albeit with the use of some reserves. Around the country, councils who have not made the difficult decisions we have are now facing the financial consequences of that. We are determined to always be responsible custodians of this authority for the people of Leicestershire. Since the draft budget was proposed in December, there have been a number of changes to the MTFS as a result of the consultation and, of course, events which affected the county. In January, Leicestershire was obviously hit by bad flooding, which damaged hundreds of properties and devastated families across our county. The floods also put extra pressure on our excellent flood teams, which were already stretched from the impact of Storm Henk in January last year. And we have been told clearly extra resources are needed to help them manage their workload. We have heard that request. We understand how vital flood work is to our communities, and we have responded by adding an extra £1 million through the Service Investment Fund to make a total of £18.4 million on flood alleviation over the next 4 years. As we'll see later in this meeting in item 9, the work the money will assist with will include further Section 19 reports, facilitating public drop-in sessions and data collection activities, and progressing both existing projects to completion as well as potential future projects as a result of the Section 19 investigations. Other changes since the draft MTFS in December include Leicestershire County Council being hit by the national insurance increases due to come in April this year. Like businesses across the country, the government's job tax will see LCC losing approximately £1.5 million, our total increase being £4.4 million, partially offset by a grant we believe will be about £2.9 million, at a time when our finances are already extremely stretched. The budget setting process has been difficult, but it is vital we do what is right and not what is easy. With this budget, I believe we do that.
Thank you. Ozzy?
Thanks, Chair. I welcome the extra £1 million for the flooding team, and that will help across Leicestershire. We've been devastated with flooding over the last year. The water tables are so high and residents have suffered quite a lot. So I really do welcome that, and I welcome the extra money for potholes, because our highways team, I think we've got one of the best highways teams in the country. our roads are one of the best in the country, and it's down to prudent working and dedication by our team. So I just want to put on record my thanks for putting that money forward.
Thank you. Christine?
Thank you, Deborah. All the work that the Adults and Communities Department, which I am lead member in, making savings over the previous 12 months will have gone by the book due to the government increases. The increases in the national living wage, which will come into effect in April 2025, will increase from 11.44 per hour to 12.21, an increase of 6.7%. In all care markets, staffing is the major cost component. Many frontline care staff are paid at or little above the national living wage, so fee uplifts needs to be reflect this additional cost pressure on providers. The employer national insurance contributions in the United Kingdom will increase from 13.8% to 15% in April. But much more importantly, the unexpected measure announced was that the level of which employers start paying national insurance will decrease from 9,100 to 5,000 per year. In markets where providers use part-time workers extensively, such as home care, this measure has the potential to increase costs markedly. The changes to national insurance will impact these organisations where there are more part-time workers significantly, which care providers fall into. Excuse me a minute. The employer's national insurance impact on full-time workers 40 hours per week will be to increase the cost by 3.5%. But for the part-time worker working 12 hours per week, the increase will be 8.43%. Assuming that many workers in the home care market work between 20 and 30 hours per week, the increase in employment national insurance costs on providers will range from 3.75% to 5.2%. The combined increase of employers' national insurance and national living wage in the same range will vary from 10.9% to 12.6%, a significant increase in staffing costs. Consumer price increase. Each fee rate contains cost elements that do not relate to staffing. For example, premises, equipment and training costs. These costs are inflated using about 12 months CPI rate of 2.5%. The annual fee uplifts paid to providers are mainly between 7 and 8% across our care markets for home care, care homes and supported living. This is a significant amount for the county council. This accounts for an increase in general inflation, national living wage and also the changes to national insurance that have been announced by the government. Overall, the county council have put over 19 million into adult social care provider annual uplifts for 2025-26. I do understand as well that I've heard that a lot of care homes and that are cutting back now on how many beds that they're having because they can't afford to take extra staff on to provide the extra facilities needed. So I am concerned about the adult care section. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of points from me. Obviously, be remiss of me not to mention children's services. Now we've got increasing pressures in SEND, but we have been working really hard on that area over the last few years, and we are starting to slowly turn the corner on that. But I think I just need to commend my team there for getting an outstanding judgment from Ofsted for our children's services with the lowest budget of all the local authorities. So we are very lean, we're very efficient, and I think members of the cabinet here have raised the certain points around there about how well we do perform with the funding we get. Can I just double check the figures? So the government, when they announced the national insurance increase, said that they would cover it for our direct staffing costs. So the figure I'm getting is that we're £1 million short on that covered. Is that correct?
We did get an £800,000 increase in the last grant, but we are still short on it. So it's slightly less than £1 million, but we are short on our direct costs.
So they promised that covers our direct costs, and they haven't by nearly £1 million. And then also we've got our indirect costs for all our contractors and work and care sector that we then move as well. So a huge impact for not just us, but all of our support partners as well. And I know a lot of charities have also been really badly hit there. So obviously we've yet to see how that plays out, but when that comes in April, but I am really concerned about that. I think another thing to add as well, I chaired the police and crime panel earlier this week, and they were also promised that their costs would be covered for the national insurance increase, and they're also short by £300,000. So it's also hitting our local police force. So across the area, everyone's being hit from all directions with already tough times ahead. So I am worried about the years ahead. But I think thank you to you, Declan, and your whole team for bringing this together and getting us a balanced budget for next year. You know, it's no mean feat with the way local councils are funded and what our statutory duties are and the services we have to provide. That's no mean feat. So I think praise where praise is due. So it's been moved by Lee, seconded by James. All in favour? Thank you. Move on to item 5, the English Devolution White Paper, Local Government Reorganisation, including urgent action taken, pages 263 to 270, and the supplementary report that you've all received, pages 1 to 16. So the next report presents the latest position in relation to local government reorganisation and advises of urgent action taken by the Chief Executive under using his delegated powers to request that the Minister of State for Local Government and English Devolution agrees to the postponement of the County Council elections until May 2026 to allow the Council to submit reorganisation proposals to Government by May 2025. The supplementary report that's now been circulated in respect of the announcements and following further information from the Government, and I'll ask John Sinnott, the Chief Exec, to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll comment mostly on the supplementary report. First, I think I should clarify the purpose of the letter, which was sent jointly to the Minister by the Acting Leader, the City Mayor and the Leader of Rutland Council. The purpose was to put Leicestershire and Rutland, or LLR, on the Government's fast track for local government reorganisation, Government having made it clear that reorganisation is needed for devolution. It's worth bearing in mind that Leicestershire first applied for devolution in 2021 and has suffered a number of ongoing frustrations. It's also worth noting the Government have made clear that its preference for devolution geography is LLR. The letter, which was jointly signed by the three leaders, included a request from the County Council to postpone its elections and to get on that fast track for reorganisation. On Wednesday, as is known, a letter was received from the Minister saying that he had decided not to agree a postponement. Another letter was received, which was sent to all the councils in LLR, requesting the development of proposals for unitary local government reorganisation with an interim plan required by the 21st of March. Recommendations A to C on the order paper address what I've said so far. Recommendation D refers to the criteria for unitary local government, which was set out in the devolution white paper, which have been expanded in the ministerial invitation. Several of these criteria are specific. Whilst the Minister wants all the councils in an area to try to develop and jointly submit one proposal for unitary local government, he's also said that the Government will understand there will be some cases across the country where it will not be possible for all councils in an area to submit a single proposal, and that this will not be a barrier to progress. It is covered in Recommendation F. Recommendation E has noted that so far it has not been possible for local consensus to be reached, and it may be the case that more than one proposal for a unitary structure for LLR is submitted by the councils. Finally, there is a recommendation to submit the report to the Cabinet, to the forthcoming meeting of the Council for information, to report progress on the interim plan required by the 21st of March to the group leaders regularly. Recommendations which are mainly to note at this stage are on the order paper. Thank you.
Thank you. And, I'm bitterly disappointed that we didn't get the approval to get on the fast track, and that leaves us then still having to submit our interim business case by the 21st of March. With our elections going ahead, we will move very quickly into PERDA, which prevents us as a county council going out there and engaging with our residents, getting their views, deciding what might be the best way forward. So it leaves us in a very tight schedule forced on us by the government, but we have to adhere to it as it's a legal invitation, which means it can't be ignored. So we will have to put the interim plans in by the 21st of March, and then the full business case, depending on what proposal or how many proposals go in, the government will then tell us which proposal is going forward, and we'll have to adhere to that by November. I don't think there's anything much more we can say. We will be taking it to the Scrutiny Commission on the 10th of March, so it can be scrutinised through the Scrutiny Commission before we submit our proposals. But as advised, it's a very, very tight timetable, but we'll do the best that we can in the interim time. Anybody got any comments or questions? Okay, so I will move the motion as set out on the order paper, and I'll move to Robert to second it.
Happy to second and fully endorse the comments made by the Chief and yourself.
Thank you. We've got no other speakers, so all in favour? Thank you. We'll move on to item 6, the response to Melton Local Plan Partial Review Regulation 19 pre-submission consultation draft, which is on pages 271 to 286. So the next report advises us of the content of the Melton Borough Council's partial review pre-submission draft local plan and presents the proposed response as the views of the County Council. Got Sharon here, Sharon Wiggins, who's the Team Manager Strategic Planning, who will present the report. Then I'll ask Robert to speak as the lead member. So over to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Chair. The Melton partial review is on the current adopted local plan, and it's reached Regulation 19 stage, which is one of the final stages, ready for submission. Members are drawn, well, their attention is drawn to paragraph 35, which summarises the County Council's position. 4 key bullet points. There's strong justification given to maintaining the plan period to 2036 with a view to undertaking a full review with an extended plan period beyond. The proposed revised policies reflect the education infrastructure being planned for in Melton. The Local Transport Authority has no fundamental issues to raise in respect to the partial review, and Public Health has worked closely with the Borough Council on the wording for policy C9 and C10 and have fully agreed on the wording proposed. A health impact assessment on the Melton local plan is to be provided this month. Members are therefore asked to agree the recommendation in paragraph 2. And just to say, there are further detailed responses located in the appendix if members wanted to go into more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert?
Hi, thanks. Nothing really much to add to that. Obviously, with the publication of the devolution white paper and also the changes to the MPPF, which is still not absolutely clear, it has somewhat made difficult. So it's encouraging to see that we have Regulation 19 that we can support and approve and has gone through. I would say with relatively easily, but I appreciate the work that the team has done to actually get to this and the consultees. So it's good to see that it's going through, and I'm happy to recommend the motion.
Thank you. Ozzy?
Yeah, I'm happy to second the report and pleased to see that the proposed plan reflects the continued delivery of the agreed long-term strategy for Melton Borough.
Thank you. Any speakers? No, okay. Been moved by Robert, seconded by Ozzy. All in favour? Thank you. We'll move on to item 7 now, the response to the Oadby and Wigston Local Plan 2020-2041, Regulation 19 pre-submission consultation draft. These are on pages 287 to 316. So this next report advises of the content of the Oadby and Wigston Borough Council pre-submission draft local plan and seeks approval for the proposed response as the views of the County Council. We are also asked to note that the Oadby and Wigston's decision to pause the progress on their plan. Jana Walker, Assistant Director of Environmental Transport, along with Sharon, who's remained with us, will present the report. Then I'll ask Robert to speak as the lead member. So over to Jana and Sharon.
Thank you. The adopted local plan for Oby and Wigston Borough goes back to April 2019, and there has been ongoing work on a new local plan, and that has reached a pre-submission draft. So again, Regulation 19, and that will cover the plan period 2020 to 2041. Members will be aware that Oby and Wigston Borough Council has decided to pause and assess the potential to build into the local plan the new standard method December 2024 figures, and this is a much higher figure for Oby and Wigston of 382 dwellings per annum, and they need to test that out along with the infrastructure. So earlier this week, on the 4th of February, Oby and Wigston Borough Council members considered their new local development scheme, which sets out a 16-month programme to carry out this work. This will look to have a further submission plan by June 2026. However, the County Council still needs to respond to this Regulation 19 before us today, and this pause and the revised programme does provide the opportunity to work closely with officers from Oby and Wigston Borough Council to overcome the concerns which we're about to just run through with Cabinet in the response to this current Regulation 19 consultation. So again, if I could turn members' attention to paragraph 36, where the key comments are summarised. And if I may, I'll hand over to Jana Walker at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, just building on what Sharon said there, there are a number of concerns from the Highways and Transport point of view in relation to the Regulation 19 consultation that's in its current form. Those are set out in paragraphs 37 to 61 in the report. There is quite a bit of detail in there, but I think the issues in general, in principle, can be summarised as we don't feel that the plan as set out fully acknowledges the impacts of growth on the Highways and Transport network. As a consequence of that, it doesn't really contain a kind of coherent strategy for managing and providing for highways and transport impacts as the growth comes forward in Oby and Wigston. And also, particularly given Oby and Wigston's location, proximity to the city, doesn't give enough consideration to sustainable transport in the future. There are other smaller issues, but those three key points are there. And given other items on the agenda and concerns this Cabinet has heard about local plan development, I think it's fair to say that a sort of consequential risk of those issues is that there wouldn't be a sufficient mechanism in the plan to secure the necessary either funding or conditions for developers to provide investment in the highways and transport network to match that growth. So from our perspective, it's good to have this opportunity to put those forward in this consultation and hope that the pause provides an opportunity to address these concerns as well as the planning issues that were described by Sharon as well earlier. So I think from our perspective, that's all I would add at this stage. And I think the recommendations as per the order paper cover off those issues.
Thank you both. Robert?
Yes, thanks for the very detailed report there. I think it underlines the real challenges that councils are going to face in delivering on the uplift of housing of 1.5 million homes. It's very easy for governments to sign these things off, but the reality of delivering them, especially in places like Oby and Wigston, where there isn't a huge amount of land available, are incredibly challenging, and that challenge does knock on to the county council as well as the district. You know, we've had the easy one with Melton that's sort of gone through. This is the difficult one, and I think the pause is absolutely right, because we do need the time to do this. But what actually we're looking at is incredibly challenging. This is an area that's already densely populated. That anyone who's had to drive around there knows that the challenges to local transport are immense there, and actually finding solutions. And what it comes down to is what we talked about right earlier on the MTFS, is who is going to pay for this infrastructure. Because what we're talking about actually is quite a considerable amount of money that can't just come from the developers. It does have to come from central government. And as we discussed earlier on, there isn't the money there. So I just want to acknowledge the incredible work and the hard work that's done by the district council and also the county council in trying to find solutions to what is, I think, is a fairly sort of insoluble problem. So it's all well and good setting these targets nationally and say it must go in there. But the reality is when you get to places like Oadby where there isn't the spare land and they already are basically part of the city, that the transport is already grinding to a halt. It's much more difficult to deliver on the ground. So I'm happy to support this. I think that the pause will give us time to continue, and we have got a number of other local plans going through at the moment.
Thank you. Ozzy?
Yes, I'm happy to support, to second the motion as Cabinet Lead for Highways and Transport, particularly as it highlights potential challenges in delivering sustainable growth supported by sufficient highways and transport measures in Oadby and Wigston, and clearly sets out issues that would need to be addressed in any future iterations of the local plan. So I'm happy to second it.
Thank you. I think Robert put it really clearly there about the targets that come through about how many houses you need to build. But if you haven't got the space or the infrastructure, where are you supposed to build them? And I do feel for Oadby and Wigston, to how densely populated they are already, to up their numbers. So we're responding to their low numbers of housing that they had to put, and they're now going to have to accommodate a lot more with absolutely no solutions coming forward yet about how we're going to get the transport and the infrastructure in there. So I think they're in a really difficult place of the government's making. So yeah, it's good that they've paused it and we're going to have that chance to work through with them about what more we can do to help them. But like Robert said, we don't have the funding either to do this. It's going to have to come from central government. So it's been moved by Robert, seconded by Ozzy. Any other speakers? Are we all happy to approve? Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. On to item 8, the strategic transport planning issues associated with the emerging Charnwood local plan, pages 317 to 334. So this next report presents an update on the issues associated with the emerging Charnwood local plan, including actions taken to comply with the Cabinet's resolutions of December 2024. So Janet is remaining with us and will present the report, and then I'll move to Ozzy to speak as a lead member.
Thank you. In presenting this report, members will be familiar that this is following a series of previous reports, so I intend to focus on the updates today, but obviously can answer any questions if needed. The report today builds on the Cabinet report presented in December, where the Borough Council had requested the County Council to consider a viability report that would be presented to the inspectors of the examination to allow the inspectors to determine whether the local plan could proceed on the basis of a SIL schedule being introduced. So the SIL is the Community Infrastructure Levy, and that would be the basis for collecting contributions towards highways and transport measures in Charnwood following the adoption of the local plan. That was the proposal that the inspectors were considering. So the officers of the County Council had reviewed a draft version of that viability report, and that was then submitted by Charnwood Borough Council to the inspectors. At the time of writing the report, we hadn't received a final full copy of the report, and it wasn't on the examination website. I think that is still the case, but the examination website is being updated. So that report forms part of the inspector's evidence. So following that submission, the local plan inspectors have now responded to the Borough Council after reviewing the initial viability report and the updated local development scheme, which amongst other things sets the timetable for the local plan. And the inspectors have outlined the potential next steps, which include a period of consultation on the SIL viability report, and also reviewing some matters and issues related to the changes to the plan, and also likely some consultation through hearing sessions being reopened. And they indicate in the letter as well that there'll be further main modifications associated with that hearing sessions that will then go into the local plan. So the Borough Council has confirmed that they want to proceed on that basis, and the inspectors have confirmed that that is possible. However, the exact timetable and what will come out of those consultations is still to be seen. So in the original report that was provided, we'd highlighted that we would review our position in relation to planning applications on the basis of that letter. We've now done that, and so the recommendation 2A 2 in the order paper has just been amended to reflect that review that we've undertaken. And I would just will read that section out just to be clear on the position of the Highway Authority. So the position of the Highway Authority in respect of relevant planning applications coming forward ahead of the local plan has been reviewed as set out in paragraphs 29 to 31 of the report and will remain the same for the time being until there is more certainty. It is likely that this will follow on from the outcome of the forthcoming hearing sessions. In the meantime, officers are requested to write to the inspectors via the programme officer seeking an invitation to attend and be represented at the hearing sessions when they resume. So we will continue to keep our position on planning applications in the meantime under review, and we will seek to participate in the forthcoming hearing sessions. The report also just draws attention to ongoing concerns that the County Council has in relation to communications around this matter. Recommendation to 2A3 sets that out. There are also just a reminder of the implications for the Highway Authority and its statutory role arising from the ongoing and delayed local plan process and the risks associated with not being able to secure sufficient mitigation for highways and transport measures. And then also the report highlights that we are working to agree a revised governance to deliver both the SIL and any changes to the local plan. Continuing to do that in line with the previous recommendations, really to enable the County Council to work effectively and to mitigate, as far as possible, potential further delays to the adoption of the local plan and any lack of funding arising from it. So I think that's the recommendations in summary of this report, and they are as per the order paper that's been submitted.
Thank you.
I'll just hand over to Fiona.
Just a further update, we have heard this morning that the hearing has been set for the 8th of April and a 4-week consultation period is going to be starting shortly. And just in terms of recommendations, a small one, the final version of the report is now on the examination website, so we might want to amend that resolution to reflect that.
Thank you. Yeah, we can make that. Yeah, we can do that. Thank you. Ozzy.
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to move the report and hope that the local plan process can quickly resume and we can move to a stage where investment in highways and transport measures necessary to support growth can be secured. Whilst our resources in this area are stretched, we recognise the importance of this for the residents of Charnwood, and as set out in the report, we'll continue to work on this to achieve the best possible outcome for residents. And I'll move the report.
Thank you. Robert?
Yes, thanks, Chairman. I'm happy to second the report and echo Ozzy's comments. I just wonder how much of this is kicking the can down the road rather than actually facing, because as I said earlier, this is indicative of how difficult delivering this growth is, and this is without the new housing. I think it is disappointing that we're continuing, we're still continuing with this, and Charnwood, continues to be a little bit difficult in acknowledging the need to actually work together on this. At the end of the day, failure to actually agree a deliverable infrastructure will be picked up by the local residents, both in their council tax and the services that they're provided in these new developments. So I think it's important that we actually continue to do our best to work with them. But I just feel that this is, again, something else that is going to be replicated in other local plans, but is going to be grinding on. And time is running out on this. We know that without having a local plan in place, they're open to speculative development, which is a nightmare for us. So it just goes back to the earlier comments we made about Oby and Wigston. Delivering this is tough, and we do need more cooperation from government and a better understanding from government and actually how difficult it is. This isn't us saying no, we're not going to do it. It's us saying no, we can't do this because we haven't got the financial, we haven't got the finances to do it. So again, I thank the team for what is an incredibly difficult situation, and you'll continue to get our full support in ensuring that we actually come up with a resolution that's best, most importantly, for the council taxpayers in Charnwood.
Thank you. James?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I've said it here in this chamber before. I think it stands to repeat that, as Robert said, ultimately our residents are not going to thank us if we don't do everything we possibly can to ensure the highways and transport network is improved, such that when development comes, it doesn't negatively impact the existing populations. And you see in my division and elsewhere across Charnwood that the roads are just becoming increasingly clogged and clogged and clogged. You just have to go down to Quedinburgh crossroads at rush hour, and you can see the impact that's having. So people that have concerns about development, it isn't just about being a NIMBY because you're getting rid of beautiful countryside. It is about the impact on services that brings with it. And if we're going to have development, and obviously that's coming, we have to have the infrastructure to go with it. So yeah, as I said, I just want to make that point.
Just a quick question from me. Obviously, you've outlined where we are now, and that obviously we now have got a date for the hearing, so things are moving along with the SIL, which is good. Can I just clarify, have we come to any agreement yet with Charnwood about the interim, about gathering wider highway infrastructure funding through Section 106? Have we come to any sort of agreement what we're doing in the interim with Charnwood yet?
I don't think we could say agreement. So the position is that we're continuing to be consulted as the local highway authority on any planning applications that are in development. The view of the highway authority is that it is premature to determine those applications in the absence of either a sufficiently progressed new local plan or a sufficiently in-date existing local plan. To date, Charnwood have taken a different view, or the committee and the officers have taken a different view, in the sense that they don't feel it's premature and have made a decision on those applications, in effect against that recommendation for considering the application to be premature from the highway authority. As far as I'm aware, that condition, that arrangement is the current one. So the next time there's a committee, I'm not aware that there'll be a change to either our position or theirs, but we will keep that under review. Fiona and I will be keeping that position from the local highway authority under review in light of what comes through any examination evidence, and any opportunity we can to secure more local infrastructure that's needed. We'll obviously be doing that, but in terms of this kind of wider cumulative approach that the evidence shows is going to kind of impact Charnwood, that's the position as it is at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. So it's been moved by Ozzy, seconded by Robert. All in favour? Thank you both. Okay, on to item 9, flooding in Leicestershire in January 2025 and the implications for the lead local flood authority and local highway authority. These are on pages 335 to 356. So the next report provides information on the impact of the unnamed storm which affected Leicestershire on the 6th of January 2025, highlights the County Council's ongoing work as the lead local flood authority, and sets out proposals to support the LLFA statutory role in managing flood risk. The report also outlines the efforts of the council to aid local residents and businesses and provides an update on the activities of the local highway authority. We've received some comments from Dr. Feltnam, which are attached to the order paper marked 9A. We've also received a letter from Neil O'Brien MP and a written submission from a local residents of Great Glen. These are attached on the order paper marked 9B and 9C. I've agreed that Neil Bannister, the member for Broughton Astley, can speak on the item. So can I ask Neil to make your representation, and then I will ask Anne to speak on the report.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me the time to address Cabinet on this particular item. As we all know, in the early hours of the 6th of January of this year, torrential rain fell in parts of Leicestershire, causing severe flooding and distress to residents. I'm here to speak about the effect of that intense torrential rain in Broughton Astley, which is part of my county division. The brook in the village overflowed for the first time in living memory, flooding homes in Station Road and Church Close. The college playing fields were flooded. The floodwaters went into Willowbrook Close. Along Dunton Road, floods occurred in Fretter Close and Blockley Road. Sewage backed up into several homes during this unprecedented downpour. Afterwards, I spoke to the affected residents. I held a surgery on the flooding issue with 20 plus residents attending, and I have visited the homes that were affected. The common question put to me was, what is the County Council doing about the flooding? And to a very large extent, this report at item 9 answers a number of those questions. And for me, a good starting point is paragraph 5 of that report, which sets out the scope of what the lead local flood authority can realistically do, and also what it cannot do, setting out the responsibility lies elsewhere. It also sets out how the lead local flood authority can help within its statutory duty. The body of this report, particularly at paragraphs 41 onwards, is very helpful about the actions taken in response to the storms. There is a recognition by the Council that extra resources are needed to meet the frequency of these intense storms due to climate change. I very much welcome the recommendations, including the extra £1 million funding, and the other actions are set out in the report. And the extra resources are there despite the tight funding arrangements and budget that this council has to operate within. I hope the residents in my division will equally welcome this way forward. I trust the Section 19 investigation and report will be undertaken in respect of the 6th of January storms, and in that investigation, the affected residents' voices will be heard. Finally, while I have the microphone, may I give my own public thanks to the council officers, the highway team, the fire and rescue service, flood wardens, parish councils, and many unnamed volunteers who came out on the morning to help alleviate the flood arrangements on that particular day. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for putting the residents' perspective and hearing their voice through you. So thank you for that. Okay, over to you, Anne.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Cabinet. As you're well aware, the county has again been hit by significant flooding. This report updates on that and also the work that we've been undertaking and will undertake as the lead local flood authority and as the local highway authority. I start by saying we fully recognise the impact and devastation that flooding has on those residents and businesses affected across the county, and that we will be working to do what we can in order to support those communities. For this most recent flooding on the 6th of January, despite no flood alert in advance of the event, the county proceeded to see the worst flooding it's experienced, with just over 700 properties flooded in Leicestershire and around 900 in total across the LLR area. I think we've got to acknowledge the real collaborative effort of the emergency services, the local authorities, environment agencies, the flood warnings, and many others in helping us tackle and deal with that really challenging situation. In terms of national support, the government operates a national flood recovery framework to support residents and businesses that are impacted. While this was activated in Storm Henk, which happened a year ago, and we're all, that's still really alive in our memories, isn't it? It hasn't been activated this time round. In my role, I'm president of ADEPT. I attended the National Flood Resilience Forum that was chaired by the Minister Emma Hardy this week, and that's one of the points I made, that we need really clear, transparent criteria about when that's enacted. Communities are really struggling to understand why they don't get support this time, but they did last time, when we've had even more devastation in the county than we've previously seen. Cabinet will have picked up as well. There was an announcement earlier this week about 2.6 billion for funding for flooding. We're still waiting to hear the detail of that as to see whether it's any new flooding or if it's already committed funding through agencies such as the Environment Agency. So we'll be looking at that with interest. In terms of local support, as a lead local flood authority, our role is about recovering and helping those communities move forward. We will therefore, as set out in the report and as Mr. Bannister's already alluded to, be undertaking our formal Section 19 investigations where they are triggered to identify the causes of flooding. I just outline 2 points regarding that. Firstly, however, if a Section 19 is not triggered, because we do have thresholds for that, we will still investigate the flooding in that area. That still happens. We just don't do the formal process, but we will investigate. That's just to ensure residents, they will not be left out. We will look at it. But secondly, the other thing, and this is about managing expectations, because it's very complex, flooding, the causes of flooding and what goes on in an area and the modelling that needs to happen, etc., to really understand that. Unfortunately, it's not a quick process, and it can take up to, between a year and 2 years to complete one of these investigations. However, I would stress as well, where actions are identified through that process and they can be implemented sooner, we will do that. The next thing I would just highlight again for the Cabinet's information, where we can identify a solution to flooding for an area, we then are required to bid for funding. We have no allocated funding for flood prevention of our own, so we need to bid for that. That unfortunately is an extremely cumbersome process, and it can take over 3 years from the start of bidding to get to secure the funding. So that means then by the time you've done your investigation, you've got your funding and then you've implemented it, it could be anywhere between 5 and 7 years for a community. That again is a point I made strongly to the Minister earlier this week. We need to get quicker and streamline these processes so we can really help the communities that need, measures implemented. In some instances, however, a solution is not either viable or there just isn't a solution that will work in terms of flood defence. Therefore, I think in our communication measures, we really need to kind of change and emphasise the point about flooding is everybody's responsibility. In some cases, it will come down to individuals taking action to protect their own properties. Our LLFA team is a fairly small team, and they had a very full workload before this this most recent event. Therefore, as been noted, the Cabinet report seeks approval for additional resources to the team, 240,000 in total this financial year, next financial year, to bolster them. We're also proposing 20k this year and 80k next year for small scale initiatives to communities that, where we identify those and it will make a difference, we can deliver something in the absence of any national funding to support our communities at this point in time. And in terms of the highways facilities, in terms of clearing out the gullies after the floodwater and the detritus and doing drainage repairs, we're seeking 460,000 this year and 700 next year. Next steps, as we heard, is to hold multi-agency drop-in sessions to collate information for those investigations we need to carry out, and bolstering our comms messages and lobbying our MPs and national government to the changes in the system that we feel that is really needed to improve our reaction and response about moving communities to be more resilient. Final points from me, as mentioned, Dr. Feltham and local resident of Great Glen and the MP Neil O'Brien has made points. The MP welcomed particularly the additional money and was requesting to ensure that money was allocated to Great Glen. We've got very many requests across the county for urgent actions, meetings and action to happen. We're working hard to understand where we need to target that, and it will take time to get through that, but we will be, just to reassure, we will be investigating all instances of flooding to identify what next steps need to be taken. Recommendations as per the order paper.
Thank you. Ozzy?
Chair. We're again experiencing the devastating impacts in Leicestershire of the change in climate. People really do need to understand that climate change is here and it's here to stay. We had Storm Heck 12 months ago and 447 properties were flooded with 202 millimetres of rain falling in 24 hours. This time we saw just under 360 millimetres of rain fall and 900 properties across LLR, 700 in Leicestershire flood. This brings the devastation and hardship to many. And my heart really does go out to those people that have been flooded. It must be absolutely devastating for them and their close family. As a county council, we work hard to support our residents in seeking to establish the causes of flooding. We do not, however, have the powers to ensure others act, and we are not funded to deliver solutions. We need government to step up to review the role and powers of the LLFA, as well as better support our communities through the flood recovery framework and simplifying the bidding process for flooding. You've heard Hans say that it can take up to 7 years to actually get to where we need to get. Government of all parties need to learn and understand that residents who are suffering devastating effects like this cannot wait that amount of time to actually get solutions. They need to step up to the plate now, and they need to fund our LFAs to actually work with our communities better to help them get recovery. I want to put on record my thanks to the flooding team. Over the last year, they've worked tirelessly round the clock to support our residents. They're a small team, and I really do appreciate them getting more money. So without that team, you know, we would be really lost. They do work so hard, and I say I'll put on record my thanks to that team and their managers. I support the additional funding proposed, and I move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ozzy. Blake?
Thank you, Chairman. Can I support the lead member's comments and echo them? He spoke very fluently there, and I think as lead member for the environment and climate change, I think it's worth drawing out the fact that the science behind climate change, I don't think is disputed by many. The means by which we share the responsibilities to tackle that problem, okay, that is disputed and debated, but certainly the science, as far as we understand it, is driving ever more frequent flooding and serious events in terms of climate, and it's a worry to us all, and we should be focused on engaging with that agenda. Can I also thank, though, the officers and the directors, specifically the director, for speaking up at the meeting at depth with the minister on behalf of Leicestershire. I think that was quite courageous in some respects, because it's very easy to be shouted down or overshadowed, and the fact that you got the message across so eloquently is testament to the quality of your teams and your leadership in this respect. Personally, I think it's absolutely disgraceful that the National Flood Recovery Fund wasn't actioned. If there was an event in another, dare I say, metropolitan area of this country, I'm sure the government will find the resources to support that particular area. The fact that this was rather localised to Leicestershire on the 6th of January does not mean that we don't deserve and require that support, and I think the government should make that support available forthwith. I will second the motion on the order paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. James?
Thank you, and I'd just like to add my own thanks to the Office of Emergency Services and many local people, including the incredibly dedicated flood wardens that did so much on the 6th of January and indeed in the days and weeks since then. I think I spent quite a lot of time talking to flood wardens, to local residents, to parish councils, the town council, and so forth in the weeks since. And I just wonder if there's more powers that we could give to flood wardens where they request them, in order to be able to do things like closing roads. Not all flood wardens have told me they would want those powers, but both in my own division and through my day job working for Edward Arger, I've talked to flood wardens, for instance in Bottersford, where they said to us they just ended up taking the powers into their own hands to close the road, because the alternative was flooding of shops and properties from as the vehicle goes through and the waves that are created there. I know in Nottinghamshire they do have the powers, flood wardens do have the powers to close roads, but I understand we don't here in Leicestershire at the moment. Is that something that we could look at to give those flood wardens that do want it the power to do that? And is there any sort of powers more generally nationally that we could have that we don't currently have? And as sort of I'd ask that question there just to see what more we could do in that regard. Secondly, and separately, I support very much sort of the lobbying of national government for changes at the in regards to flood responsibility. So obviously at the moment we lead flood authority, but that's very much, as you know, a coordination role with no money and no particular powers to compel. So I suppose in some ways, like being like a chairman of a committee, what we need really is, and again, it's something I've seen from my own division and more widely across sort of the Melton and Syston area, is the responsibility for the flooding is so varied that sort of getting a simple answer to who's responsible and who to lobby and who to talk to is very confusing. The Environment Agency for sort of small rivers in places like Rearsby and Syston, but if you go to Cossington, it's then riparian owners, and you're trying to get 100 different riparian owners to agree on anything. What we need, I think, is a flood authority that takes the lead and is funded accordingly to be able to have the money to spend on sensible, joined up defences, but also with the powers to compel landowners where necessary to do the work to defend our communities, regardless of the size of the waterways and the local conditions.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, it sort of actually follows on from that. Again, thanks to the team for all the work that they do, and I think it's also the community sort of do tend to do that. I know in my own patch, when people were driving through, people just parked their cars, blocking them off, sort of taking direct action. A couple of questions for you is how do we recruit flood wardens? Because I know some areas are short of them, and anything that councils can do on the ground to try to help with that, certainly through parish councils. And the second thing is we've got a clear criteria for where we'll get some support on either alleviation or some schemes, because again, I'm in an area where we have flooding, but it doesn't actually encroach on people's property. So therefore, at the moment, there's and the flooding team are actually very good explaining what they can do and what they can't do. It'd be much easier, I think, sometimes, certainly for councillors, to say, I'm sorry, but I have to be honest with you, you will not get the support here because it doesn't actually tick those criteria. It sort of follows on from James's thing. This is actually quite complicated, but if there's a very clear criteria, so we can maybe close that down at an earlier stage. But the final thing I will say is that quite often very small measures will actually deal with the issue. So it's good that we're looking at sort of funding those. But the second thing is it is about getting these powers to get landowners to maybe build attenuation lakes or to put up some sort of barriers to stop the runoff. So if there's anything that we could do, certainly through your role in the National Committee, to emphasise that these are not massive measures that need to be there, but very small things can actually make a big difference.
Do you want to pick up those 2 points from Robert and James?
Just prompt me if I forget any. In terms of the closing roads, obviously as the highway authority we do that. The issue being things change quickly, don't they? So we can't be everywhere all the time. Water comes up quickly, it can go away quickly, etc. We are looking at whether we can get flood wardens, or that's something flood wardens could do. We're working with our legal and insurance colleagues to think through the implications, but it's something we're considering at the moment. Absolutely agree with you in terms of the roles and responsibilities, and it comes on to Mr. Ashman's point as well. Something that I really do want to push government on is about that, the roles and responsibilities across the water thing, and actually those powers for the lead local flood authority. From the meeting this week, I don't think they're up for that at the moment, but it's something we need to keep pushing with government, because really we need to, it's at the crux of it. Sometimes I see things, and I'm sure you do with your, constituency mailbags. Actually, things just get passed between party to party to party, and actually it must be so frustrating, and for the communities it really is difficult because we don't have those powers. So absolutely up for that. There was a point about, oh sorry, what was your point, Mr.? Oh, flood wardens, they are recruited through the LLR, but, you know, it usually is a voluntary thing through the communities where you've got somebody who's interested in that, who wants to take that on. They do get training and we will support that, but it's always, there's, you know, a plea to the community if anybody's willing to do that, but they will get the support for doing that, but it's coordinated through the LLR. And there was another final point I wanted to come back on, sorry.
It was the criteria for
yes.
getting alleviation.
Sorry.
Did you mean the Resilience Forum?
Yes.
When you said LLR, the Resilience Forum?
Yes, sorry. LRF, sorry. Yeah, I do, sorry. Got a cold, it's gone to my head, sorry. And the criteria, you're absolutely right. To tick the box at the moment, the criteria, it's purely about number of, you know, protecting houses that will be flooded or properties that will be flooded. However, one of the things that was discussed at the National Forum was that this week is the DEFRA are looking at revising their funding criteria because they absolutely understand that it doesn't particularly help maybe cases like our rural areas where you've got smaller numbers of housings that won't trigger. So, you know, if you get 5 properties protected against a large urban area that you've got, you know, 100, etc., you're never going to get the funding. But actually the devastation for that community is still, you know, it's massive, isn't it? So they're reviewing that, and they also recognise, for instance, the current criteria doesn't particularly give opportunities for things like natural flood management techniques. So they are up for reviewing the criteria around that to really kind of widen it out because they recognise there's limitations in what they're doing.
Thank you. Just a couple of points from me, and just to say I support both of what Ozzy and Blake did say, all their comments there, so I fully support what they've said. I am still really shocked that they've not opened the National Flood Recovery Fund for us just because the storm wasn't named. I think, you know, it hits all the criteria, and I did sign the joint letter for the LRF that we sent in from all the Resilience Forum that we sent into government. And even more shocking was that we had ministers from the government coming down to our area. Did they just come for a photo shoot? Is that what they came for? Because they visited the area, they spoke to residents, they saw the devastation of our communities, and then they've gone back to Parliament and they still haven't opened the recovery fund for us. So I am really struggling to understand why, and I will continue to lobby for that. I thank you for your clear explanation about the role of the local lead flood authority, because I think there's a lot of misconception out there about what our role is. And like Ozzy said, the expectations of, you know, how long we have to wait for solutions, 5 to 7 years, is just absolutely ridiculous. You know, people are flooded, they were flooded last year, they're now flooded a year later, and they're still likely to be flooded again because we're nowhere near actually sorting out what caused the flooding or looking at solutions, and then having to bid for the funding, which just takes forever. So we will continue that, the lobbying for government to give the local lead flood authorities the proper powers, the proper funding for us to be able to do this for our communities, because at the end of the day, this is about our residents and our communities that are getting flooded year after year, and our hands are tied because we don't have any powers or any funding. So we all sitting here want to help our residents and help those communities, but we're blocked by the legislation that we sit under. So I'm sure we will all continue to lobby, also continue to lobby all our MPs that they keep pushing this. But for me, the recovery fund not being opened is just not acceptable for our residents. And I will continue to keep lobbying government to say, why have you not opened this recovery fund for our residents? So thank you very much for the report. Moved by Ozzy, seconded by Blake. All in favour? Thank you all for your work, and thank all the officers that helped with the recovery and the emergency responses. Okay, we'll move on to item 10, the revised environment strategy and net zero action plans, pages 357 to 426. So the next report seeks approval for the revised environment strategy action plan and the revised 2035 net zero council action plan and the 2050 net zero Leicestershire action plan. We're all asked to approve a common mink control policy for all members of the Leicestershire and Rutland Water Vole Steering Group, and to allow the Director of Environment and Transport to approve any further similar control policies in relation to invasive and non-native species. The report was considered by the Environment and Climate Change Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 22nd of January, and its comments are attached at the order paper marked 10A. We've also received some comments from Max Hunt, which are attached to the order paper marked 10B. So Anne has remained with us, Director of Environment and Transport, and will present the report. Then I'll ask Blake to speak as lead member.
Thank you. Cabinet is aware that part of the MTFS process last year that our targets in relation to net zero were amended to reflect the Council's resources available for this area. The Environment Strategy Action Plan and the Net Zero Action Plans have therefore been revised to reflect these new targets and resourcing position. And undertaking this work for the new action plan or the updated action plans, we undertook a prioritisation exercise and efficiency review, and the key action to ensure that the key actions that we're taking forward are set up as best we can to be as effective as possible. The revised action plans are set out for you in the appendices A and B. The report also seeks approval for the common mink policy, as you've heard, and along with the delegation from me to undertake several similar future amendments to control policies in consultation with the Cabinet lead member. Our draft local nature recovery strategy identifies water voles as a priority species and identifies actions including implementing predator control as part of that. One way of supporting this action is a member of the Leicestershire and Rutland Water Voles Steering Group, and each member is currently seeking a similar approval as we are today. The policy itself is about controlling invasive non-native species of mink in order to protect the endangered native species of water vole and follow best practice in doing that. As the acting leader has mentioned, this was reported to the Environment and Climate Change Scrutiny in January. In terms of the Environment Strategy and Net Zero Action Plans, the committee were supportive, particularly the streamlining the actions, although they did feel that at points some of the actions could be more smart in terms of clear measure of progress and timelines for delivery. On the mink control policy, while they supported the action to reduce invasive and non-native species, they did question whether mink was the most destructive factor, and also they had concerns around the method of disposal as whether this was really the most humane way to do that. For the Cabinet's information, in response to that, the policy that is being followed is based on expert guidance of the Water Life Recovery Trust Field Manual on this topic, and that trust they are considered experts in this field and following years of experience, and one of its key objectives is about developing and spreading the use of best practice for mink control. So this policy is in line with that. The recommendations as a per the order paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Blake?
Yes, thank you. I move the recommendations on the order paper as they are. I just want to say the recommendations are in two parts. One is about the environment strategy, which has been well explained already. I think this is a case of cutting our cloth accordingly. The council are serious and still are serious about delivering carbon neutrality as an organisation by 2035 and for Leicestershire by 2050. But we're also realistic and pragmatic in that a lot of the challenges we face, we can't do on our own. It's going to take government legislation, government policy, and frankly, government resource and money to the regions to be able to deliver that objective. So I invite the government to fund us in this respect properly if they want us to meet those targets in a timely manner. Just one example, if we were to renew our fleet of vehicles here at Leicestershire County Council, would go a long way to get ourselves back on track to meeting those targets that were set. But the trouble is there's a huge amount of expense in doing that, and the council simply does not have the money. So if government wants to come along and help out, that would be a good use of government resource. The second part is about the mink control, and I think it's fair to say when this came to the scrutiny meeting, it created a little bit of consternation, some of the measures involved. I'm not a specialist in this area. We take it on good professional advice how to deal with predator control in this respect. So I support the motion and I support the recommendations and the content of the report. And I'll leave it to the officers who are in some respects the professionals in this area to deliver that policy, because what I understand it is needed and necessary. I move the order paper. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Louise?
Yes, happy to second, thank you, and agree with everything Blake said.
Any other speakers? No? So moved by Blake, seconded by Louise. All agreed? Thank you, Anne. Okay, item 11, Special Education Needs and Disabilities and Inclusion Strategy 2024 to 27, pages 427 to 482. So this next report seeks approval for consultation on the Leicestershire Local Area Refresh Send and Inclusion Strategy for 2024 to 2027. So Jane Moore, Director of Children and Family Service, will present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is being presented today to seek approval for consultation on the refreshed Send and Inclusion Strategy, which has been produced by the Send and Inclusion Partnership Board. The strategy sets out the vision and the priorities in delivering education, health and social care services for children and young people between the ages of 0 and 25 with special educational needs in Leicestershire. And as the strategy sets out, there are just under 14,000 pupils on an SEN support plan in Leicestershire and 6,887 children with an EHCP in Leicestershire. So SEND pupils account for about 17.2% of the Leicestershire school population. The priority areas for development in the strategy are around ensuring that children and family are at the heart of what we all do, that we've got an accurate understanding of the needs and lived experience of children with SEND, and that children with SEND are prepared for a successful transition throughout their life. And leaders across the partnership work together to plan, deliver quality assure the Leicestershire offer, and also that will provide timely and effective support to children and young people with SEND. So the implementation of the strategy through the action plan will be monitored through the Send and Inclusion Partnership, and a public consultation on the refreshed strategy will seek to confirm that the priorities that we've identified within the strategy are the right focus for the improvement activity to be overseen by the Partnership Board over the next 3 years. So it is proposed to hold an 8-week consultation exercise on the refreshed strategy, and subject to Cabinet's approval, this will commence on the 10th of February and run until the 6th of April. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move the motion on the order paper, and yeah, I'm very happy to support this. And just to point out that Leicestershire Send Hub, which is our parent and carer forum, which is the voice of all our families and children, have been fully involved in developing this strategy. So it's been done as a really good piece of joint working. So I'm very happy to move it. Pam?
Thank you. I think this is a very well thought out strategy. The department have obviously worked diligently in looking at it. I think you've done a very good job in working with partners and bringing those partners on board. As a grandmother of somebody with special needs, I think some of the things that you're planning for the younger children, I mean, fortunately, he doesn't need those now, he's a bit older. But I think it's important that you're going to do the easy read version so that people can understand the strategy a bit more and perhaps think of some other things that aren't there. I think bringing in the breaks for families so that that child can go somewhere for overnight or a week or something like that is absolutely desperately needed, not just for the parents, but for their siblings as well, because quite often they can't do things because of the other brother or sister that they've got that needs this help. And I think supporting young researchers and young voices, the 3-year project, I look forward to looking at that. And I think it's really, really important that we work with these young people because some of them are capable of going to work. And I think preparing them for employment is really something that needs to be done. So I congratulate you all on the work that you've done, and I look forward to seeing it develop. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. So moved by myself, seconded by Pam. All agreed? Thank you. Jane staying with us for the next item. So item 12, the Leicestershire Policy on Admissions to Mainstream Schools, the determination of admission arrangements, pages 483 to 554. So this report seeks approval for changes to school admission arrangements from September 2026, including the reduction in admission numbers at 2 primary schools, 2 junior schools and 1 infant school. So Jane will present this report. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you. So the report is seeking Cabinet's approval for the changes to the school admission arrangements from September 26 that include a reduction in admission numbers at 5 of our schools. The school admissions policy does set out the council's admission arrangements for the purposes of allocating school places at community and voluntary controlled schools within Leicestershire, for which the council is the admissions authority. Leicestershire is experiencing low birth weight rates, and as a consequence of which we've had over 1,500 surplus school places on National Offer Day last year. And this is the second year that there's been a significant surplus, and the trend is likely to continue for a further 2 to 3 years before births begin to increase. The changes proposed will help avoid schools falling into a negative budget position and ensure that the council doesn't breach the infant class size regulation. The consultation on these reductions was run between the 11th of November and 23rd of December last year, and 43 responses were received, all of which were largely positive or neutral. The proposed changes that were consulted on were around a permanent reduction to Statham Primary, a permanent reduction at Burbage Junior to correspondent with the infant school, a temporary reduction at St Mary's, a temporary reduction at St Denny's, and a temporary reduction at Ibstock. The majority of views in response to the reduction at Ibstock Junior didn't support the reduction down to 60, and the number was reconsidered, and governors have agreed to a smaller reduction to drop the admission number from 90 to 70. So paragraph 23 now sets out the final proposals for the first time admission numbers for those 5 schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I'll move the motion on the order paper, and I'm just picking up that bit about the low birth rate we're experiencing at the moment. We don't expect that to last. Probably it will pick up again. So when a school does request to drop the numbers, we always try and make sure that it's a temporary drop so that we can then put those numbers back up when the birth rate goes up. So, but this is about financial viability of schools. They can't be running a class with 10 pupils in. It's just not sustainable for them. I'm picking up the point of the Ibstock just to show that we do listen to consultations and we do review our figures. So I think that's key that we do point that out as well. So we have listened and we've gone back to the governors there and they've put the numbers back up for us slightly. So that's good to see. So I'll move the motion on the order paper. Pam?
Yes, I do move the motion on the order paper, sorry.
James?
Just a quick, Mon, just a quick question about the Ibstock. Obviously, there was more objections, so it changed. Is it not just, I read the paper and a potentially slightly misunderstanding. Is it the case that these are reduced because the demand is reduced? And if that is the case, why did anyone object? Because presumably it wouldn't have been reduced below the demand level. Or am I misunderstanding it?
Yeah, so the pupil admission number is set that essentially sets out how many places are available. And by reducing the admission number, it means that schools can reduce their staffing levels accordingly, essentially. So what Ibstock were keen to do is to move the offer from offering 90 places down to 60. The worries that were expressed in the consultation were that that just would not give enough places for children in the local area to be able to get into Ibstock. So it was increased by another 10. So what that means is Ibstock Junior will need to plan their staffing on admitting 70 pupils rather than 60.
Okay, now the speakers. So it's moved by me, seconded by Pam. All agreed? And you're still here, I think, Jane, for item 13. So exception to contract procedure rules to approve agency cover for the provision of special education needs assessment tribunal officers. And this was urgent action taken by the Chief Executive. This is on pages 555 to 560. So the report details the urgent action taken by the Chief Executive to approve an exception to the Council's contract procedure rules to use a supplier outside of the current corporate contract to supply temporary Senate tribunal officers agency cover. And again, Jane will take us through this.
Thank you. So the report does set out the urgent action that was undertaken by the Chief Exec to approve the exception to the Council's contract procedure rules to use a supplier that was outside of our current corporate contract in order to supply some temporary Senate tribunal agency cover. The tribunal team within the Senate service was set up specifically to deal with the Senate tribunal cases in the local authority, and in particular to make sure that we were being compliant with our duties around tribunals and mediation and responding in a timely way. At the point of establishing the team, we were not able to recruit to the tribunal positions either on a permanent basis or using the existing agency contract. Therefore, it was necessary at that point for us to put in alternative arrangements outside of the standard procurement process. Action has now been taken to make sure that we have regularised the situation, and a number of further actions, as we've detailed in the report, have been put in place to make sure that that situation doesn't reoccur. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move the motion on the order paper. I've nothing else to add, Lee.
Yeah, happy to second the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Any? No. So moved by myself, seconded by Lee. All in favour? Again. On to item 14, the annual report of the Director of Public Health, Leicestershire's Health Inequalities in Health, pages 561 to 602. So the final report presents the Director of Public Health annual reports for 2024, Leicestershire Health Inequalities in Health, and Mike Sands is here as the Director of Public Health, who will present the report. Then I'll ask Louise to speak as lead member.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Just reflecting on the agenda from local government reform to the budget, to SEND, to planning, to water vols, and now inequalities in health. It's possibly one of the more varied agendas I've ever seen. As you say, the purpose of this report is to present my annual report for 2024, with apologies that the publication date has just slipped into 2025. When I presented last year's report on the overall health status of Leicestershire, I said at the time that this year I wanted to come back and dig into a bit more detail into the inequalities in health that people in Leicestershire experience, and particularly those groups that experience the most pronounced inequalities in health in our population. That is what I've done in this report. In doing so, I've shamelessly stolen from the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment chapter on health inequalities that was published as part of the JSNA work plan last year. I have refreshed data in that chapter where it is available, and I've also slimmed it down a bit, but I would like to thank the team and Sally Valance in my team in particular for their work on the original JSNA chapter. So what's in it and what does it tell us? Well, I mean, think traditionally, if I said, what would you expect from kind of public health analysis, you're probably used to those figures, which from an inequalities perspective, kind of say life expectancy in area X is X number of years lower or higher than inequalities in Y. It is always expressed in terms of geography. And that inevitably, when you do the analysis by geography, always shows that deprivation is the kind of biggest driver of inequalities in health. Now, that's not to say that isn't the case, but from a Leicestershire point of view, I want us to almost get beyond geographic boundaries and think about the groups of people, the individual people within Leicestershire that experience inequality. So it's not to say that deprivation isn't important, but it is just one of a number of drivers that make a difference to our health. So the report goes through that, even in a slimmed down form. There's a lot of data in it, which I'm not going to go through. But what comes out at the end through evidence and local data and national data is that list in paragraph 18 of those groups that experience the starkest inequalities in health within Leicestershire. Now, again, I won't go through the whole list, but I've highlighted some of the ones in bold, both in the covering paper and the report. If you put together the impact on individuals, and then if you like times it by the number of people that are affected, it's those groups in bold: looked after children and adults, people living in poverty, because poverty is important, the homeless population, people with severe mental illness, the prison and offender population, and the Gypsy, Roma and traveller community are the biggest groups facing the biggest challenges within Leicestershire. Having said I wanted to do something different than just a straightforward geographic analysis, inevitably I always does get drawn to geographic data. So that's in there as well. Again, it probably reflects a little bit about the population in those areas. And those areas, I think there's 15 middle layer super output areas are listed in paragraph 20. Coming on to the recommendations and the so what. As always, there's kind of recommendations for myself and my department and the services that we commission and deliver. You'll know through some of the service reductions and cuts that we've had to do over the last few years that we're no longer in a position to have specialist service, for instance, around the homeless population, as an example. But I think it's important when we do service provision and service redesign that my team bears in mind the groups that are listed in this report and does something for them. In essence, it's a universal service model, but we need to make certain we're reaching out and engaging with the groups that are listed in paragraph 18. I would also challenge other services within the council to think in that way as well. So I'm not expecting people to invest money that we don't have, but I would expect them to be able to describe how they are responding to needs of these priority groups. And in particular, I will be making the same recommendations to my NHS health colleagues on an LLR level. Much of the discussion, understandably so, around health inequalities is always driven by the picture of poor health and deprivation in the city. But I do need them to understand that there are specific groups in the county with significant numbers of people too, that are important that they bear in mind, in their own service redesign, and they don't just focus on the city to the detriment of the population of Leicestershire as well. So there's a number of things in there, which again, I want to take forward both individually and with partner organisations and my own colleagues. The report has been considered by the Health and Wellbeing Board and the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and the reports are included in the report, and as always it will end up being considered by Council at its meeting on February the 19th. So the motions are as per the order paper. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Louise?
Thank you. I think it's a very clear report for everyone to read. I think it's really important to highlight those groups that are suffering these health inequalities, and there's actions within the report to take forward. I think the report obviously will influence work carried out through the Health and Wellbeing Board and the wider system. And as Mike has said, it's already been to Health and Wellbeing Board, it'll go to full council. I think it's really important that when we have such tight funds and, everybody is saying that we need to focus on prevention, that we actually have done the work to find where the key target areas are, bearing them in mind with any of our services that we deliver. So thank you. I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Louise. Christine?
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, I support what Louise has said, and also what Mike has said about there are other areas rather than just the city. And one of the areas highlighted is in my ward. And like Louise has said, prevention is very important, and my department agree with that we've got to look at prevention with adults before they get ill, that they need further treatment. So I'm quite happy to second it.
Robert?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question you probably can't answer. First of all, it's actually encouraging to see taking a different approach, and I don't think to anyone sat around the table, the groups that you actually identified are the ones that actually suffer the greatest health inequalities. The big question is, and this is something which I think falls through not just in health, but in just about every government department, is what plans have we got to reach out to these people? Because the reason that most of these people are actually suffering is because they are the hardest to reach out. They don't live the sort of lives that most of us do around here. They're often dysfunctional. Without the resources, have we sort of come up with ideas of how we actually reach out to them to try to do exactly what Christine said, which is actually the prevention rather than waiting for them to be ill?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So I think the answer is yes. I'm thinking about services within my own department. We always talk about the role of local area coordinators in that one. If I think about what we did with homelessness, again, it was driven by financial necessity, but we said we would build in to that kind of universal offer that is the local area coordination team, something that was about reaching out in particular to the homeless population. So I think we still, even in a financially straitened circumstances, have services that do engage successfully with those groups. I think this analysis kind of extends those groups a bit more, so there will be a challenge on resources, but are there people that still engage in that way? Is there a resource that does it? Yes. Have they got the skills to reach out to whatever you want to call them, hard to reach communities, seldom heard or something? Then I think the answer is yes. As I say, I think having a structured process to look at the kind of range of groups is probably the biggest challenge. There's always more that we could do. As well, and then the other bit for me, having said, well, to some extent, don't worry, there's a service there, like there'll be services in other departments. I think there's also a challenge though on our kind of what I might describe as mainstream engagement activities. So when we do things like our consultations, our community engagement, just bearing in mind these groups as well. So I think it's a mixed picture. I want to provide reassurance that through teams like local area coordination, they will be doing that reach out into those groups. But I think there's always lessons within this one for all of us to learn in terms of who do we need to engage with and think about the skills necessary. There's, of course, there's other bits within the council. I'm thinking about the multi-agency traveller unit and the great work that they do in terms of engaging with the Gypsy, Roma and traveller community. So it's not a blank sheet of paper.
Just very quickly come back on that. That's the point I should have made, actually, is the training that we do within the council, because it can't just fall upon your department. There's actually making people aware of we need to flag this up to the relevant department, because that's often a way that you can reach out, because we'll be coming into contact with them in different ways rather than just through health.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Again, I'm wary of kind of saying to colleagues, well, you're doing this already. Do you mind just doing extra with another 7 groups in 15 different areas? So there has to be a balance. But essentially, I think you're right. Spreading an awareness of these are the ones that face the starkest inequalities in health, making certain you're at least thinking and following a thought process in terms of your local community and going the extra mile to reach out to those groups, I think would be a really good way of trying to make the universal is also specialist, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you for your recap on my morning's work at the start of your speech. That was very useful. Thank you. And I do always enjoy reading your annual report. It's always different. I do really enjoy reading it every year. And I think your point that you just made lastly about the local area coordinators, we do deliver stuff right in the heart of communities. We don't deliver from County Hall. We deliver right in the heart of our communities where the people's needs are. So I think you pointed that really well. So it's moved by Louise, seconded by Christine. All in favour? Thanks, Mike. Item 15, items referred from overview and scrutiny. There were none. Item 16, any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent? There are none. So thank you very much for today. And that brings today's meeting to a close.